Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with my weekly recap, breakdown, and review of the latest episode of Disney Plus WandaVision. We're talking episode 3, which is my favorite episode of the 3 so far, and we're going to break down so much in this video. We're talking Mephisto, Nightmare, Tommy, Billy, aka Speed, and Wiccan. We're breaking it all down in this spoiler review, but before we dive into it, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you all are following me on all my other social media accounts like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, which you can find all those links in the description below. If you are new to this channel, welcome to the community. Consider subscribing, and while you're at it, hit that notification bell. That way you can get the alert for when I drop new content. It would mean a lot to me if you all can like and share this review. It not only helps out the channel, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comment section, let's discuss everything about this third episode. I want to know your pros, your cons. Is this your favorite episode of the 3 so far? And also, let's talk about your thoughts, your theories, your predictions for the weeks ahead. And let's have a great discussion about that in the comment section. So before I get into the breakdown and review here, I want to take the time to thank everyone that tuned in to our very first episode of our live stream that we do every single Saturday, which is a WandaVision breakdown review of the latest episode, but also we talk about the latest news in the MCU. Myself and my 2 co-hosts, Chris and Amanda, and we had a special guest, James from Real James. We had such a great time in the first episode, and I want to thank you all for tuning in, and we will be back tomorrow, myself and my 2 co-hosts, but also there may be 2 special guests. I can announce one of those guests, and that is Ren from Ren of Geekness. We're going to be talking about this third episode, even diving deeper into the spoilers, diving deeper into the Easter eggs, but we're also going to talk about the latest news of the MCU of the week. So again, tune in tomorrow, 3 p.m. Central Time on this very channel for the live stream of breaking down this episode and talking about the latest news in the MCU. So hope to see you all there tomorrow. But with that now out of the way, let's get into this breakdown. So first and foremost, I mentioned this in my non-spoiler review of the first 3 episodes of WandaVision that I got to see in advance. I said that this was my favorite episode. And the reason I say that is because I think this particular episode did such a great job of not only paying homage to the sitcom, which this show has done a great job in the first 2 episodes, but I love the mixture of the 70s and the Brady Bunch, which I was a fan of that show, but also I love how they mixed in the mysterious aspect, the thriller aspect of the show. Now, we don't get all the answers, we don't get all the pieces of the puzzle, but you're starting to see the pieces of the puzzle come together. So I thought the mixture of the sitcom and the mystery played really well in this third episode. And then when you look at it, narratively speaking, I personally think that Disney should have released the first 3 episodes versus the first 2 last week. And I say that because look at the story. When you meet the Harts and they ask WandaVision those hard questions, when did you get married? Why did you move here? Why no kids? We get those answers to the question in the first 3 episodes. They end up married in the first episode, right at the very end. They end up being a part of this community. Why did they come to Westview? They want to be a part of a community, have this perfect life of this family, and they end up being accepted by Westview once they win the talent show. And then you look at this episode. Where are the kids? Why don't you have kids? Well, we have Billy and Tommy now. So I think narratively speaking, the first 3 episodes just would have played better, in my personal opinion, if it was released all at one point. But I get why they did that. If you look at the calendar of Disney and just look at the calendar of MCU, once this show ends after the 9th episode, literally 2 weeks later, we're getting Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You look at when that show's coming up to the end, we're getting Black Widow, and then you're getting Loki. So it makes sense for the calendar why they didn't release all 3 at one point. But I think it just would have played better if all 3 released last week versus the first 2. But that's just my thoughts. I thought this episode was fantastic. And we'll get into the reasons why going into this recap. Starting off with, we're in the 70s. Right? So we get the Brady Bunch theme, which I think plays so well into Wanda and Vision. Again, going back to just last week's episode, when we get the Bewitched episode and the connections of Wanda being connected to Samantha, who in the Bewitched show, she has to suppress her power. She wants herself and her family to be welcome a part of this community. Very similar to what we get in episode 2. And the same thing happens in this episode. We get the Brady Bunch themes and connections. We know the Brady Bunch has this big family, this extended family. They come together. Same goes with Wanda and Vision in this episode. Their family not only gets bigger, but they now have kids to add to that family. So I like the connection that we get between why they chose the 70s and why they chose the Brady Bunch. But into the actual episode, we see Wanda has the doctor over. He announces that the babies are on their way. We're only 12 hours removed from last week's episode, which Brings me to this point. Why are things accelerating so fast? Why is Wanda now having these kids so quickly? Again, going back to, we have to get married, we have to be a part of this community, we have to have kids. It's almost like there's a time limit to this. It's almost like if we don't do this by a certain time, it's all going to go away. So something to keep in mind there. But we see again, Wanda, her pregnancy is accelerating. At this point in the episode, the babies are kicking. She's at the 6-month mark, all the way within 12 hours. So we also get the nice little Easter egg. And we're going to talk about these characters later on, but we get the name of Billy and Tommy, the names they're going to choose to name their 2 kids, or those are the names they didn't know they were having 2 kids. Those are the names they were thinking about naming the 1 kid, which ends up being 2. Going into, let's talk about Vision here. Now, in this episode, Vision starts to realize that something's off. He even says it to Wanda, like he thinks that something's off. We see Wanda, well, I'm assuming, now let me know what you all think about this. Is it Wanda that's reversing time and hitting that rewind button? Is it the person behind the monitor at episode 2 or episode 1, which I'm theorizing is Sword? Who is controlling this rewinding situation? Let me know your thoughts there. But it rewinds. He doesn't finish the sentence. He goes back to being normal again. But let's talk about Vision's part in WandaVision so far. I am to assume, this is my theory, think about the last time we saw Vision, right? Which was in Infinity War. And he was having the Mind Stone being taken out by Shuri. Now, stick with me with this theory. Now, what if at the end of Endgame, Shuri and Wanda meet, or Wanda comes to Shuri to Wakanda or vice versa. She says, hey, Wanda, this was what I was able to get from Vision. I thought it would be nice to give this to you. Now, keep in mind that maybe Shuri was able to piece some of the fragments of the Mind Stone and whatever she gives Wanda, and Wanda takes it upon herself to bring back Vision with the mixture of her magic. And that's how Vision's now brought back. This whole thing of Shuri bringing him, and that would be a nice cameo, right? To get Letitia Wright as Shuri into WandaVision. We get like a flashback of that scene. But that would maybe explain why Vision's starting to realize something's not right here. And that explains his part in the show. But also, this is a perfect way to bring back in Ultron. I still think, I said it in last week's review, I still think that Ultron some way, somehow is making his way back into the MCU. Let me know, again, what's your thoughts on Shuri, the whole theory I just brought up there, and if you would like to see Ultron make his way not only into the show, but in his way back into this new phase of the MCU. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. So back to the show, we see that Wanda's water breaks, and we get the whole, the show, they ruin the carpet, there's water all over the place, again, playing into the whole sitcom funny aspect of the show. We get a awesome Easter egg. We've gotten some great Easter eggs with these commercials, and we get the Hydra soap commercial. If you want to escape, if you want to get away, get the Hydra soap. We talked about the importance of the commercial in my review last week. We talked about it on our live stream last week, that this points to the trauma of Wanda. We get it with Stark Industries in the first episode. We see it with the Strucker Watch, and we see Hydra yet again. So it plays into the idea again, who's behind all this? Is Hydra? Have they infiltrated the situation? Have they made their way back to affecting Wanda? Baron von Strucker still out there. Ultron still out there. It makes you think that Hydra will play a part into this show, but let me know your thoughts there. Back to the show, we see Vision runs to get the doctor because at this point, Wanda's babies are on the way, or one baby they think is on the way. She hears loud noise in the bedroom, and in comes Geraldine, who knocks on the door, and we get this funny moment of a stork coming out of the wall and walking around, and Wanda trying to hide it from Geraldine. She also doesn't want to show that she's pregnant, which again plays into the funny moment, and we all know where babies come from, right? They come from storks, right? But nonetheless, I thought this was a nice little Easter egg, and this might not have nothing to do with anything, but I found it interesting that in the comics, there's actually a character by the name of Tony Stork, who's from Earth 9047. He's also a part of the Avengers. Now, that is part of a what-if scenario, and again, Tony Stork and the Avengers, but again, Tony Stark and the trauma might be some connections, but it might be nothing at all. But in particularly going into the importance of storks, the meaning behind them are linked to actually home protection. A stork is a sacred and ancient Greek goddess, and the stork symbolizes protecting home and families and children, and storks are extremely protective over their family. So I think that's the significance of why they shelter stork. Not only is it where babies come from, it's Disney and it's PG, but also the significance of that stork is the significance of protecting their home and protecting their family, which plays into Wanda protecting her family. But I want to go back to Geraldine. We talked about it in regards to AKA Monica Rambeau, but let's go back to episode 2. Now, there's a theory out there. Let me know what you all think about this theory. But if you look of episode 2, when Wanda finds that sword chopper and is shrunken down to a miniature size, Could it be that those are Pym particles? Now is Hank working with SWORD and was able to shrink that actual helicopter? And also, it's important to remember that when we get that helicopter, we're introduced to Monica Rambeau. So was that her way into Westview? Which, speaking of Monica Rambeau, let's go back to episode 2 when she meets Wanda. If you all remember, she kind of hesitates when she meets Wanda. She can't remember her name almost, right? She's like, oh, my name is, and as soon as she touches Wanda's hand, she says Geraldine. So at that point, and this is the theory out there, that when she shakes her hand, that she's now entering Wanda's reality, and now she's Geraldine and not Monica Rambeau. She forgets who she is, not until later in this episode. Let me know your thoughts on that theory. Hank Pym particles, Monica Rambeau in that helicopter making her way into Westview, and once she touches the hand of Wanda, she forgets who she is until she remembers a little bit later in this episode. But let me know your thoughts there. But back to the episode, Wanda officially gives birth to one baby, and then another one comes out, and we have the introduction to Tommy and Billy, their 2 boys. Very critical parts of the MCU, which, by the way, let's just jump right into this character breakdown. If you all aren't too familiar with Billy and Tommy, they were introduced in the Young Avengers issue 11, and in that issue, it was revealed that Scarlet Witch used her reality warping powers to create these 2 sons, these twin sons. Now, unknowingly, using the 2 of the 5 scattered fragments of the soul of the demon Mephisto, who we'll talk about here in a bit. When the boys' souls were reabsorbed into Mephisto, they destroyed him and the souls were reincarnated. Now, Billy and Tommy, Wiccan and Speed, they have an extremely confusing backstory in the comics, but I think this is Marvel's way of, and again, we're going to talk about Mephisto here in a bit, but this is their way of saying, hey, Young Avengers, they're making their way into the MCU sooner rather than later. Wiccan has incredibly powerful witch abilities, very similar to his mother, Wanda. In the comics, he looked up to Wanda, but again, it's revealed that that's actually his mother, and he finds out that he has a twin brother in Speed, who has, obviously, the name alludes to Speed. But I think it's going to be really cool introducing these characters, Wiccan being a gay character in the MCU and playing into that storyline, but also, again, playing into the greater universe. Young Avengers are coming to the MCU, not only with these characters, but if you look at the announcement of Catherine Newton being cast as Scott Lang's daughter, she's going to probably be Stature. We can look at just the Disney Plus shows. We have Miss Marvel. We have Kate Bishop and Hawkeye. Young Avengers are coming, but I don't think they're going to be like a big Avengers movie. They might have a movie later on, but I think Disney's going to take a page out of Netflix, where we had the Defenders had a show on Netflix. I think we're going to probably 2 or 3 years, we're going to get a Young Avengers TV show on Disney. I'm thinking that's what's going to end up happening, but let me know your thoughts there. But again, Tommy and Billy, Wiccan and Speed are big characters in the MCU, and I can't wait to see what happens when Wanda finds out that these kids are fake and how they're going to end up being reincarnated in the MCU. Is going to be a lot of fun. But again, we'll talk about Mephisto a little bit later. As we go back to the episode, we see Vision having a conversation with Agnes and Harp, and they're realizing things aren't right now. There's something weird going on. Vision's really starting to realize that this isn't normal, right? And we'll talk about that here in a bit. But Wanda brings up her brother to Geraldine. She mentions her brother's name, and Geraldine says, oh, Pedro, he was killed by Ultron, right? Which, again, Ultron name brought up in this episode goes back to my theory that Ultron will be making a way back into the MCU. Wanda asks her, why did you say that name? And Geraldine starts to realize that she slips and starts to realize that Wanda's onto her, and she actually looks at her necklace, and that is the same exact logo for SWORD, and it makes so much sense that Monica Rambeau works for SWORD, right? When you look at Captain Marvel, her mother helped out SWORD, or at that time S.H.I.E.L.D. You would imagine that she grew up to want to be a hero. She grew up to want to work for Nick Fury. She wants to look up to Captain Marvel, so it makes sense that she will work for SWORD, but obviously only time will tell. As we cut back to the episode, Wanda asks her who she is. We see Herb and Agnes talking to Vision. They almost let the truth out of what's actually going on, but they're stopped in revealing the truth. As we wrap up the episode, Vision comes back in to check on his wife, which, by the way, when he meets his 2 boys, it's such a great family moment for them to finally have a family together. Really good moment. But we see Vision checking on the 2 boys, checking on his wife Wanda, and he realizes we're Geraldine, and Wanda says she's no longer with us. Camera pans out. We get a view of, it's a nighttime at this point. We see the Westview sign. She's kicked out of the portal. In come the helicopters, the cars, the trucks. end of the episode. Geraldine, aka Monica Rambeau, is no longer in Westview. So much to break down. Again, the biggest thing I took away from this episode, again, I love the sitcom Brady Bunch growing their family, but I love the mystery aspect. Geraldine, WandaVision in regards to Monica Rambeau, Hank Pym going into the portal, realizing she doesn't belong there, kicking her out of the portal. Monica Rambeau working for Sword. That stuff is so much to play into. But again, I think the biggest question that I want to bring up to you all, and I want to know your theories, who's behind all of this madness? We talked about Agnes and Agatha. We all know that in the comics, or if you don't know, they play both friend and foe. And right now, Agnes is a close friend to Wanda in the show, but she's not like a big villain, right? She's a pawn to the chess piece. She is a puppet to the puppet master. So I don't think she's the big bad if she is to reveal to be Agnes. But let's talk about Nightmare. Now, if you all aren't too familiar with Nightmare, he is a demon and the ruler of the nightmare world, the dream dimension. He's also the owner of a club called Fear. Now, he's essentially the MCU version of Freddy Krueger. He feeds off your fear, he feeds off your dreams, and he has incredible ties to Doctor Strange, which would make sense in Doctor Strange 2. If you all don't remember, Scott Derrickson wanted to actually have Nightmare in the first Doctor Strange, but he thought it was just a little bit too much to have that character introduced to the first movie, and obviously all the stuff that we got in that first one. But he did say that he wanted to have Nightmare appear in Doctor Strange 2. We unfortunately know that Scott Derrickson is no longer a part of that project. We have Sam Raimi being the new director, but I hope that they allowed that script of Nightmare being into that film still in Doctor Strange 2. And I think this would be a great way to introduce the character in the show first, and then have him be in a big part in Doctor Strange 2. But that's one villain that could be behind this. But I think the number one character behind all this madness is Mephisto. Now, there's been a lot of rumors that Evan Peters might be this character. Then some people think that he's going to be an alternate version of Quicksilver. We'll see what comes of that. I love Evan Peters and everything that we get with him in American Horror Story. He's a great actor. So we'll see who he's going to be playing in this character. If it is indeed Mephisto, if you all are not familiar with this character, he was first introduced and debuted in the Silver Surfer issue 3, so he has ties to the Fantastic Four. But going back to his powers and who he is in the comics, he poses as Satan in the comics, and he is responsible, like I had mentioned earlier, for creating Tommy and Billy, Wiccan and Speed, but he also is responsible for creating Johnny Blaze, who becomes the Ghost Rider, who I would love to see Ghost Rider make an appearance in Doctor Strange 2. But also going back to Mephisto, if you all haven't read the comics in regards to the Infinity Gauntlet, he served as the servant as Thanos, so he has a lot of ties. He has a comic book run where he fights Galactus, and they have like a tie. So if you can go head to head with Galactus, you know that he is an important, powerful character. But in particularly, he manipulates people and he takes people's souls. So going back to this show, what if Mephisto, or I should say Wanda, made a deal with the devil, sold her soul to get this perfect family? So let me know if you all think it's Wanda who made a deal with Mephisto, who's the big villain in the show, or if it's Nightmare, if it's Agnes, if it's Ultron, if it's Hydra. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But just a couple things I also want to bring to the table. We have to remember there are Skrulls out there, and not only good Skrulls that we got in the first Captain Marvel, but there are bad Skrulls, and there's super Skrulls out there. Do we think that the Skrulls have infiltrated this situation? But in particular, stick with me with this theory. If you all remember Captain Marvel, the machine that Thanos had Captain Marvel hooked up to get the information from her mind, what if the bad Skrulls, super Skrulls, have that same machine? It's obviously more advanced than it was in the 90s. They've somehow become someone else that Wanda trusts. They bring her into the situation. They put her in their machine. And they're trying to pull the powers from Wanda. What if the Super Skrulls are behind this? Let me know your thoughts on that theory. And last but not least, again, what are the ramifications of Wanda manipulating these different decades? She's going from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. I imagine we're going to be in the 80s next week. But when she does that, what is that doing to the MCU? She's warping reality. She's tearing the fabric of reality as we know it itself, which would explain the multiple Spider-Man, the alternate versions of the villains, Fantastic Four making their way into the MCU, X-Men making their way into the MCU. So every time she resets these decades, it's literally tearing the fabric of reality. So So much to go over. Again, let me know your thoughts on this particular episode, your pros, your cons, your thoughts, your theories. I thought this episode was fantastic, and I can't wait to see what's coming up next in next week's episode number 4. But I love this episode, and we will be diving even deeper tomorrow, again, Saturday, 3 p.m. Central Time on this channel. Myself, my 2 co-hosts, Amanda and Chris, our special guest, Ren, and maybe one more other special guest. I'm going to announce that on my social media, so hopefully you all are following me there on the social media accounts. But again, I want to see you all tomorrow so we can break it all down on the live stream, talking about the show and talking about all the latest news from the MCU. So there you have it. That's my review on this episode. As always, make sure to like this video, share this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you don't miss any of my other content. Thank you all for watching this review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you in the next video.